reimagining claims the first 72 hours, challenging the status quo. I mean, I've listened to a number of presentations over the last couple of days, and certainly from the building of the resilience in the last year, Northern Territory going through building resilience, and certainly change is upon us. It can't be ignored anymore. Looking at some of the challenges that we've been through over the last 8 years, particularly about 40 odd catastrophes across the country. So I'd like to think we speak from a little bit of a place of authority, certainly authority in our business, and it's just opinions and views that we'll share here today. But when you work across regional, rural and metro Australia for strata, commercial and residential type clients, progressives, big boys, you generally get a flavour of what's working and what's not. And what we try to do is we try to take the best of that and bring it in our business. We do invest in ourselves in terms of investing and putting those processes and ideas into technologies. And we're very fortunate to expand those technology views. I'm a big believer in not throwing people at it, simply because it's my business and I have to start it with my money and it costs a lot to throw people at it. I'm a big believer in getting the process right and working with the people to get the process right. And I think we're on a precipice in the next couple of years of significant change in insurance. You heard over the last couple of days where you had, there is significant change coming. It's actually upon us right now. And it's the ability to whether we're going to either participate or be spectators in that change. And for most of us in this room, we actually won't get that choice. Insurance is changing. The industry's changing. The people who own businesses are changing in terms of insurers buying one. When you're right in the front of that at the moment with Allianz. So there's significant change everywhere. And change doesn't have to be scary, and what I like to do is come from the big, broad, scary concept of change, particularly when if you're an MD, if you're in strategy, if you're at frontline claims management, which I believe is actually the most important role in the organisation, the coalface people, because they're generally the ones who can tell what's going in the organisation. Hopefully you've got a place to suggest how improvements can be made in whether you're in a broking business or an insurance business. But I'm a huge believer that process change is absolutely required. We can't ignore it any further. But come away from the concept of it's too big and it's too scary to something that's practical. So I'd like to share with you today some of the things that I believe are going to disrupt the market in the next few years and how we're applying them, and the little things. The changes that you make in your organisation today is all going to be about the little small steps. And some of those examples, and to prove that every single one of you are adopters, whether you're from a broker, whether you're coalface claims people, whether you've worked catastrophes before, whether you're an underwriter, this all applies to you. Whether you're in charge of creating revenue, improving margins, driving efficiency, looking at productivity, managing people, it all applies to you because change is going to impact you whichever way you look at it, which is cool if you're not scared by that. And even if you are, I'm hoping to break down some small steps to show you how little steps in the past in other industries will impact you. Let's play a little game and talk about what happened 20 years ago in bill paying and banks. And I'll give you two scenarios and two companies, and you get to choose by just simply raising your hand which company that you would prefer to spend your money with or be with. If we take a look at bills and banking, hang on, excuse me. If we take a look at bills and banking, we've got one example of, and I'll just use this as Company A. So Company A, bills and banking. You go home, you look in your letterbox, and you get your water rates, your electricity bill, and your council rates. Traditionally, in the past, what you would normally do is bring those letters inside, open them up, rip off the barcode at the bottom, take them down, get in the car, drive down to the post office. Either you're bringing cash or you're using a credit card. If you need cash, you need to go and get the cash to bring back to the post office, and you pay those bills and you go home. Company A. Company B, 20 years later, has allowed you to get those bills, put them on the desk, put them on your counter at home, not worry about them till just before Desperate Housewives of Beverly Hills kicks off, and you're 10 minutes and you've paid those bills. Now, the convenience around paying those bills or getting in your car and doing that, most people are going to be choosing the second versus the first, simply because companies have decided, hey, listen, there's a faster, easier, more efficient way to interact with our customers. I would suggest even from a banking perspective, I mean, hands up who is traditionally still going into the bank, and it's okay if you are still doing this, traditionally going into the bank and filling out a deposit form to to take money out or put money in or withdraw form to take money out? Who's doing that 90% of the time? Anybody? How are you doing it? How are you traditionally doing banking now? On your phone, internet banking, right? Why do you do that?
Because I always remember to do the banking at a convenient time when it's not open.
Perfect. So convenience. Faster, easier, more convenient. And it's interesting when we take a look at some of those industries like bill paying or the banking, and we start thinking about how we used to collect medical refunds. I mean, as Matt said, I've got 3 small kids. My wife was generally collecting 3 or 4 bills, whether it's dentists or physios or doctors. She'd wait till she collected a few before she'd go in. She did this at a horrible time too, so probably very similar. 3:30, she'd pick up the kids from school, drive to the local Westfields. That's where HEFs was. Go in there, wait in line for 30 minutes to collect the money. Now she simply goes in and she pays the bill. When she leaves the doctor, swipes one card, they ask for the card back, they swiped another card, and the rebate goes back onto the card. Why did the medical organisations or the carriers decide to do it that way versus another way? Faster, easier, more convenient. Mind you, it's also very economical for them to be able to do it that way as well. And the interesting part when we consider how those simple processes, so someone has sat down and decided there's a better experience for a customer if I can just swipe one card and swipe another card. 2 very simple things. Complex in terms of being able to get the adoption and get people to do that. But if you would have gone back 20 years ago and said, you'll do all of your banking online using a mobile device, well, actually, you wouldn't even know what a mobile device back then was because they used to be about this big. But you wouldn't have thought that. And there's too many, the adoption rate now is so great that we're all used to doing it. So if you then take a look at property claims, and I'm going to use property claims as an example, it's where we specialise. We haven't even scratched on the surface of enabling a customer for either choice. When can the assessor turn up? Can I choose for the assessor to turn up? Could I assess the claim myself? Now, one of the ground rules I normally set in terms of a conversation is everything's on the table. Hang the legacy at the door, whether you're what do they call them? SIP. Where's Katie? A SIP, I learnt last night, was a supporting insurance professional, not a senior insurance professional. And a YIP is obviously the young insurance professionals. Whether you're a SIP or a YIP, looking at property claims and having a look at the choice that we give customers around property claims or that first notification loss period, in that first 72 hours is an exceptional opportunity to improve the way a customer does business with us. Does anyone in their businesses do what I call a frustration analysis? Have you ever thought about the concept of a frustration analysis? Who handles complaints? Anyone handle a complaint in the last 12 months? All of you. So do we do a frustration analysis? What's creating the frustration? Well, that's just part of the process and no one can do anything about it because either our organisation doesn't allow us to do anything about it or it's just the way things have been done. Or when we get a challenging conversation with a broker, or a challenging conversation with a policyholder, or a challenging conversation with a trade or service, do we ever stop and wonder, what's causing that? How do we fix that? How do we make that better in the future? Because I tell you what, we're deploying a lot of money and a lot of spend in terms of managing that, yet we're not getting to the root cause and working out why those things happen. And hopefully I'm going to demonstrate in terms of the first 72 hours, particularly in a catastrophe, which relates to building resilience in the Northern Territory, how customer frustration or insurer frustration, there's a lot of stuff that frustrates insurers about providers, about assessing firms. If you're nodding your head, hopefully that's not at us. But then before we do that, we generally want to ask what the customer's saying. I'm always interested in customer surveys, and these I've just pulled out 4. 82% of the customers want issues resolved quickly. Really not that complex, right? But how complex do we make issue resolution for the customer? Forbes study says that 86% of the customers would pay more for a better experience. Just pause on that for a second. When you're all out there as brokers or insurers competing on price at the moment, and someone's suggesting that I would pay more for a better experience, then doesn't service then become the differentiator away from price? Doesn't the opportunity to invest in a better, faster, easier service become the differentiator away from price? This is the one I actually like the most. A 5% reduction in customer deflection can increase profitability by 25 to 25%. I didn't make this up. That's significant. So if you add those two things, I would pay more. And if you could retain me or stop me from deflecting, your profitability increases. It starts pushing back towards claim services and the time in which a claim is, an insurer gets exposed to a claim, the ability for them to be able to demonstrate best practice service. Customers are increasingly frustrated by the level of service and experience. 91% say they have to contact the company multiple times for the same reason. 89% say they have to repeat their issue over and over and over and over again. Can we make it faster, better and easier for them? I want to take you a concept. I want to challenge the concept here. So when we look at developing processes, we also look at other industries and say, if we were to re-engineer the front of a claim, who's doing it unbelievably well? Now, here's a concept. You've got the emergency room. Now, you would probably suspect that the first customer interaction in an emergency room probably needs to be pretty accurate, right? Because there's life or death circumstances that are outcomes. So the ability for a doctor to say, well, how do I stabilise this patient before I save them? And why is it in an emergency room that a doctor can ask a series of yes or no questions in less than 30 seconds to save a patient's life, yet we struggle to approve claims, log claims and do things in 7, 10, 14 days? Maybe there's not that life or death emphasis at the front of a claim, but the customer's just as important. And so if you take a look at the triage processes, and this is what I want to bring into the concept now, I want to bring in a concept called collection of information and who collects that, and tie that into the emergency room urgency. I mean, how many brokers call up and say, I don't know where the claim's at. My customer's just called me and they don't know where the claim's at. An insurer has to then call their assessor and find out where the claim's at. Remco put up on a slide yesterday about lack of transparency and visibility over a claims process is creating some of the biggest frustration in the industry. Customers can be on the outside and know exactly where they're banking their bills and how to do stuff really quickly on mobile devices, yet they can't track their own claim. They don't feel in control of their own claim. Brokers are increasingly frustrated that the service isn't being provided there. So we looked at this concept of emergency, and without the dramatics of life and death, we said, what if we could collect information really, really quickly? And so from taking a look at this particular scenario, and so I used the typical scenario, so I'm using a Darwin cyclone claim. We need to understand the stakeholders in this claim environment. The stakeholders, obviously, it's a weather-related event. We've got various stakeholders involved, and I'll get to those in a second. We've got we'll have to have a look at the current process, and let's propose a new process with the life or death triage applied to it. But here we've got a claim where a tree's landed on a roof, the roof's been damaged, the water's getting in, the ceilings are being collapsed, the contents is flooded, the carpets and everything else, or the tiles are soaking inside. We've got no electricity to the outside because the telegraph pole's being damaged and the fence is damaged. A typical cyclone claim. Now, if we apply that to the current process that we've got now, these are the stakeholders that are involved, and they're important because they've all got their own agendas. The policyholder just wants a safe and secure property as quickly because it's their biggest asset they've invested in. Yeah, so for them, you know what? It's probably life and death. It's as good as life or death, because they save up all this money to buy a property that they're really proud of, and all of a sudden it's significantly damaged. But I've got to challenge the industry, because that's where the sense of urgency stops. The broker says, yeah, well, I've got a sense of urgency, but you've also got 1,000 of these other customers who are damaged. So let's not be critical, let's just be open to a discussion that says the policyholder themselves thinks it's life and death. And yet many conversations I've had with either insurers or brokers or assessors going, oh, the customer's complaining again, the customer's complaining again. Well, you know what? They've got a tree on their house. They've got no power. Their roof's collapsing. They've probably got 3 kids. God forbid they haven't got a TV with 3 kids. It might have been damaged, or their iPads are wet, and that's really even a worse problem because you lost your babysitter. For those who've got young kids, you understand that. For the yips, don't worry about it. You've got fence damages and pets roaming around. You've got no power to your house. And how long is that taking us to respond? Would you be surprised that 20 to 21 days to mitigate, just mitigate, not assess, mitigate is the average time it would take to do a claim like that, just to get the place habitable? 3 weeks worth of frustration. Go back to the scenario of the doctor. You'd be dead. If it took 3 weeks to diagnose exactly what to do to try and save your life, let alone stabilise your house, let alone repair or make you better. I'm just trying to draw correlations between the two because I think it's something that's quite profound that I'll show you shortly that will even speed that up even further. But you've got the policyholder, you've got the broker. The broker's got the agenda of saying, hey, listen, look after my customer. I've worked really hard to get that customer, look after my customer. They then hand over that custodianship to the insurer. And they say, okay, I'm going to hand over the customer to you, but you need to look after my customer. Yeah, but no worries. You've got emergency services and trades. You've got property assessors and you've got builders. And we've got to create a model that's very similar to the Easy Pay Bank, Easy Pay refunds, and we've got to make it faster, easier, and more efficient. Because I can see a lot of you laughing right now. Obviously, something's not going well in that process in some of the property claims that you're managing at the moment because it is challenging when you've got all those stakeholders involved. Then you've got to take a look at the current process. And the current process looks simply like this. It doesn't give much flexibility of how a policyholder gets to log a claim because they generally still have to pick up the phone. 80% of policyholders still prefer to pick up the phone so they can talk to some people. It's actually changing now. There's also online, but online just to submit a form and it lands somewhere for someone else to log in another system is not efficient. Being able to share information, triage, life or death, yes or no answers, to be able to organise quickly mitigation activities. So get your fence repaired, get the tree cut down, get the tarp on the roof. But let me show you an example of, I'm going to go through a slow example, an actual example of frustration. This is one from one of our frustration analysis pieces. So I'm throwing myself under the bus here. So in the first 72 hours, you'll all relate to these are the stakeholders we just spoke about then, and the most important stakeholders who get to lodge that claim or know about that claim straight away. Now, this applies not just to property claims. You've got a policyholder who's got some damage, they've suffered some loss. We're just using an example of quite a severe catastrophe here. Policyholder logs their claim with their broker or goes direct to their insurer, and guess what the insurer or broker generally asks? What's happened? Now, go back to the doctor and go back to the triage. If I come in, the question I want to pose here is that the best process to collect the fastest and best information straight away? Because I guarantee you if I showed you another, and I'll show you another slide here in a second, but if I showed you another slide in the top right-hand corner and I didn't actually draw that picture the way I drew it, you would probably just see the tree on the roof. And most non-technical people will share this information. A large tree has impacted my roof. So the broker says, okay, large tree has impacted my roof, I'm going to contact the insurer. They send, guess what they give the insurer? Large tree has impacted my roof. So by the time it gets down to someone who can do something about it, either the property assessor or the emergency services, the only information they get is, large tree has fallen on my roof. But here's where the frustration starts. Because non-technical people, and this is not a criticism of the industry, so not a criticism of brokers or insurers or providers. This is just, I think we've got, and I'll just be frank here, I think we've got the process arse about face. I think if we can connect non-technical people to technical people very quickly in the first 24 to 48 hours, we can get a better result. And a proposed model could generally look like this. So what if you had the ability to be able to say a policyholder could make one call or go online? They could be guided through a really intelligent, smart triage process. And that triage process could gather critical information such as I can validate, well, here could be the experience. Using technology and a re-engineered process, you could have a validation of policy and an identification of the policyholder instantaneously. The policyholder then relays information that they're not just tree has fallen on my house. Tree has fallen on my house, and the next lot of questions say, do you have electricity? No. Mrs. Smith, can you just go outside and just tell me if the tree's actually fallen across the power lines? Yes. Mrs. Smith, can you see if the point of attachment or where your electricity cable is connected, because I'm using plain English because I need to speak to Mrs. Smith, she's not technical, has been removed from your house? Oh yes, and actually the timber's actually broken away. All right, great. Mrs. Smith, the tree's landed on your roof. Is your roof damaged? Yes, it is. It's got a big hole in it. The water's coming in everywhere. It's flooding my lounge room. Okay. So in my head or in the system, I'm deducting all the things that need to happen on the first initial call. Mrs. Smith, the water that's in your house, in your lounge room now, is it still there? Yeah, it's 1/2 foot of water and my TV and everything else is wet. My carpets are wet and my floors, my walls are buckling. I need drying equipment in here. I'm going to get spoilage in my fridge. And the most important thing, I haven't got any iPads for the kids. So all of these things on that first initial call can be gathered. It's not about Ken, this is actually happening now. It's happening now in intelligent triage processes, very similar. Number one rule of presenting, turn your phone off. Sorry, I lost my train of thought then. Can I call him back and just let him know? No, just kidding. Just kidding. Let me just turn that down. Losing all the contents. So all of a sudden I've identified all of these things. And if you're using the yes, no, save your life example in the emergency room, you've got the ability to collect all this information, and not just collect it, you've got the ability then to be able to connect it to immediate mitigation actions. So what's the implications of that? Reduced costs for insurers. Okay, I promise you this, lock up a house that's been wet for 3 weeks and have the assessor turn up 3 weeks later, and you watch the second and third damage that's occurred through mould, particularly up here. Oh, my expensive cost has gone up. Well, and most people shift their focus to the supply chain. I'm telling everyone, if we shift our focus to gathering information up front better, faster at the start, where mitigation actions and emergency services can be applied, not only will you get a customer result, but you'll impact significantly average claims cost. So who wins there? The broker? The broker wins because all of a sudden the client and the customer, whose their agenda is being focused on. The insurer, because there's a mitigation of cost, there's a mitigation of damage, there's potentially no temporary accommodation that needs to be required. But it needs to consider a potential model. And this is just a concept that we've created into a technology that works, but this is just a concept that we're putting out there today to suggest, hey, listen, the broker needs to be fully informed, the insurer needs cost, quality and life cycle focused on, but do they really need to be passing tree impact on my roof to tree impact on my roof, to ensure a log's tree impact on my roof, to who sends tree impact to a roof? Do they need to do that over 2 to 3 days, or can we better connect technical people with non-technical people to be able to collect information very quickly to act same day? This is what the two models do produce. Model A produces that visual. Model B produces that visual. And the difference is significant cost. The difference is, and when I say the traditional model of why are we relying on the customer to be able to be unbelievable property experts and diagnose 7 things that are wrong with my house, plus the size and width of the tree, because that's important, because it's a type of arbitrist you need to get out there. Whether the tree came from the next door neighbour's yard, because that's important, because there's a policy implication. Why are we relying on a non-technical customer and also a non-technical claims administrator at the insurer level, at the broker level, to relay that type of information? Because unfortunately, in the traditional process, in the first 72 hours, you get this. But the opportunity is to have a look at a model that actually can create that. And from a customer perspective, I would rather be, I will actually ask the question, if you're a customer in either one of these houses in the first 72 hours, I mean, what's the scenario for you? Because scenario A says, tree impact to my house. Okay, well, the person says, well, it's a tree impact and it's to the house. Well, I've got to cut the tree out, I've got to cut the tree down. So the insurer sends the arbitrist out. Arbitrist turns up and the customer says, but what about the electricity? Well, no one told me about electricity. So the customer gets on the phone to the insurer and says, hey, listen, no one's coming out here with the electricity. Sorry, I forgot to tell you that. So the insurer sends out his emergency make-safe the electrician. The electrician turns up and the customer says, what about my fence? Now you're getting a little bit of frustration from the customer. The customer's saying, don't worry, I'll call the broker, or who will call the insurer, who will call the assessor, and the assessor will organise someone to do the fence. Fence guy turns up. Now remember, why is the policyholder asking these different trades who are turning up what's next in the process? Because guess what? No one's spoken to them about what's next in the process, so they're completely uninformed, but they need things done for their property. And this is these actual examples are existing today, not just in your world up here in Darwin, but it's all over the country. Medical triage, its concept, has a significant application across every type of first notification of loss. Every type of first notification of loss. I'm going to show you a concept called See What the Customer Sees in a second that takes that to a new level. But let me pause there. I mean, there's a lot of logic that I say there's a lot of logic that sits behind that, but is there a lot of logic for you guys that sits behind that if I was customer A or customer B? Getting that information captured in 24 hours or getting that information captured in 24 hours? Have we got brokers in the room? Any brokers in the room? Yep, yep. I mean, you guys must be incredibly frustrated. You sit right in the middle. of the policyholder and the insurer. But also the insurers must be incredibly frustrated too. And there's a cost of administration here. There's a cost of how many kind of times we're touching that customer. And God forbid we don't do the good job, we actually end up losing that customer, which is a cost to both the insurer and the broker. So how can we improve it? Take this concept of collection and connection. And then you'd ask yourself, who's the best one to collect? Because traditionally, do we allow a policyholder who's stressed, who's got major damage, should we be relying on them? Because I guarantee the doctor in the ER doesn't wait for the patient to say he's got an aneurysm, because they're not technical. And through training and experience, the doctor will do a process of deduction through yes or no to get to the point where, you know what, I can now treat you. But yet in this industry, we rely on the customer to tell us everything. And I think that's what can change. But the outcomes. If in the first 24 hours we're able to collect information, connect it immediately to service providers who can, put the tarp on the roof, reconnect the electricity, cut down the tree, fix my fence, find my dog, because my dog's gone because my fence is broken, find my dog, replace my contents, please start with the iPads, dry my house before my property assessor has to turn up. Because in the past, the assessor has to turn up before all that stuff could happen. And what if Carlos comes around again? Bad for you, good for us. What if Carlos comes around again and 1,000 claims come about? Then 3 to 4 week waits are the norm. So what are the implications on 3 to 4 week waits on a property damage that looks like that? Significant costs and significant frustration, just broken down. So I was talking to Margaret about this last night. Some say, well, isn't that obvious? Why can't we? These things are obvious. Why wouldn't we do these things sooner? Why wouldn't we see that Triage is collecting information faster? It's because you have to recognise there's a technology timeline. And I talked to the IPS about this last night. This is why I believe the industry is on such a precipice of change, and positive change. Because it wasn't until all these things occurred in terms of technology to the point where we all accept there's a cloud, not in the sky. We all accept there's a cloud. We all probably save photos. Some people use Dropbox. There's probably iTunes people out there. Cloud's accepted to share information. So how does that practically apply in our world? Well, every single person walks around with one of these devices that actually wraps up all of these historic technologies. So haven't we got in our hands an ability to share information very, very quickly that doesn't have to rely on a property assessor to turn up immediately? Think about that. Just think about that for a second. That means you will become the property assessor. Now, Margaret's a bit nervous in the front row here, so I'll try and work around this. But you become the property assessor. Because all you need to do is give the technical people the eyes, and we can connect 24/7. So your customer, if you're a broker and your customer is a policyholder, or you're an insurer and they're your policyholder direct, 24/7, 365 days a year, the ability for devices like this to connect me, who's technical, to your customer to capture information very quickly, to set up and send out trades and services for immediate response and mitigation. At 3:30 in the morning that event happened, at 7:30 trades and services are turning up. Your customer's experience is what? Negative or positive? Probably a hell of a lot positive, right? As opposed to the 3-week wait for the property assessor to turn up and start all those actions. Now that might sound like blue sky, it might sound a bit fairy and it's out there and it's years away. I'm going to show you something in a second that it's here now. So if we take a look, this is the opportunity where we've got the new thinking, new models and breakthrough. And I challenge everyone in the room, you're either going to be a spectator or participator in this anyway, but the industry is going to move along and the whole industry is going to change anyway. So automation and robotics, like you heard about yesterday, the ability to do things faster and easier and better. And I don't like the big jargon words, so I like to use faster, easier, better. Because from a customer's perspective, if I collected all of their information straight away and I organised all of their trades within 24 hours and all of their property was safe and secure and they didn't have to move out, then that's faster, easier, better. If then I could share information to the broker and the insurer around what's covered and what's not, collect and validate content straight away, that's again a very hard process, It's faster, easier, better, but not just for the policyholder, but also the broker and the insurer. And to be honest, as a property provider, if you tell me to fix hole in roof and I turn up and there's no roof on the house, well, you haven't shared me the right information. If you tell me that there's a large tree on a roof that's caused tile or iron damage, that water's getting in, that the tree needs to be cut down, that the power line needs to be re-established, that you're going to need an electrical engineer to reattach the point of attachment, and we're not going to need to dry the property out to prepare them for the property assessor, hey, guess what? I just go out and do my job. So it's about sharing information in a better way, in a life or death situation, if you go back to the doctor, and collected by the right resource. I mean, the last thing I want to do if I get in a critical ill situation is have the hospital administration clerk walk in with a triage clipboard and say, how can I save your life? I want the doctor to come in. Actually, I wouldn't even want the nurse graduate. I want the top-end doctor to come in and tell me I'm going to live. Yet anyone takes information off a customer these days. Anyone conducts a triage. I'm not being critical, I'm just making observations for those who are nervous. Solutions. Give you an example of one of the solutions, the solution I was talking about before. This solution, so none of this happens without collaboration. We didn't come up with this. So we combined the views of insurers, emergency services, adjusters, and builders. And we said, what if we could collect information in a really quick way? Would that give a customer impact, a client impact, a broker impact? Would there be underlying financial impacts? Would the average cost of the claim go down? Would premiums be affected? Would more information shared quicker to the trades and services mean we don't have to pay for contingency, which is always a hidden cost? So looking at this scenario in the top right-hand corner and applying this type of smart triage and assessment produced a model like this. Now we've got a significantly damaged property. We've got a policyholder who can connect 24/7. It goes through a smart triage process and the ability to capture accurate information. And if you take a look at the left-hand side there, you can see when we talked about before about the no power, the fences, the carpets, the drying, but all of that's collected on that first initial call. Then there's just a connection mechanism. So some of the technologies that we build, we connect directly to emergency services. So I can actually take that call, whilst I'm on that call, I can be sending SMS notifications and alerts out to the emergency services who are contacting the customer as I'm hanging up the phone. It's available now, it's not Blue Sky or Star Wars. But you've got to be bold and you've got to be willing to try things different to get a different outcome. If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always gotten. So on the allocation and mitigation perspective, all of that work happens before a property assessor turns up, and if he's even required. On this type of claim, he would definitely be required. On a simple break and enter, where my front door's damaged and the TV's stolen, you've got to question the relevance if you can connect me to your house and I can see that damage straight away. The question the relevance of paying or waiting 2 weeks for an adjuster to turn up or assessor to turn up and paying $250 for a report that's not going to tell me anything more than what I can see if I can get connected. So, smart triage, collection and connection. Let's just look at some of the benefits from a policyholder perspective. Frustration. Redo your frustration analysis. Less frustration, knowledge of upfront what's happening, confidence in the broker insurer. Confidence in the broker insurer, brand building. Less disruption and anxiety. But from a broker's perspective, if we just take a look at the reduced administration, you know, not feeling like I'm the middleman and not having control because I know what the customer's saying, but I can't actually see what's going on. One of the brokers would say, why isn't all that information being collected up front the first time? Great question. High customer satisfaction, broker informed of the claims process. Now we've got a policyholder who's fully informed and we've got a broker that's fully informed. And the result for the insurer is compounded by two, because they've got full visibility over and actions over the policyholder, but they've also got a fully informed broker. So reduced claims cost, high customer and broker policy retention, increased NPS scores, and we've got reduction in claim cycle times. Collection and connection, just looking at reordering how and who collects that information. So they're not big steps, they're small steps. So again, which customer do you want to be? The one that waits 21 days for those actions to happen, or the one that waits 24 hours for that action to happen? And these are some measures in terms of results, and for those who are the financial people in the room who are quickly deducting how keeping claims open for 60 days cost you and your business. versus 10 days. So we take a look at a standard now, the industry standard now. And that's not made up. 60 days to make claims decision is not made up. Run a catastrophe and tell me how long it took you to run your had claims decisions. Brokers out there or insurers out there, how long did it take to make claims decisions? Because across the industry over the last 12 months, whether you're a banking institution or you're a small progressive insurer, and we collected a lot of data on this, up to 60 days. Potentially a smart triage process and claims decision is starting to having a significant impact where claims decisions can be made within a week to 10 days. But do we stop there? Because that's cool and it's great to do that, and it's 10 days is better than 60 and you're going to have delighted customers. But then let's talk about what's next. You know, I don't get stuck in the past. I try not to. It's not profitable. The innovation now and about the what's next. And the what's next talks about, just re-engineering the first 72 hours, the what's next talks about what if I could see what you could see the minute your property was damaged? And for all the investigators and fraud people in the room, there's other ramifications for being able to see immediately. Contents damage, contents validation, property damage, before the policyholder gets down the pub and realises that he's got 10 laptops. And you've got the ability to be able to connect immediately to emergency services in the property space. But the same for those who are in motor, same applicability. So let me just, and there's one slide before for the main slide, let me just remind you of this process, because this process gave way or created the way for new thinking, for breakthrough models, collaboration of insurers and suppliers and brokers in the industry through frustration analysis said, let's create a better experience in the first 72 hours. And we're not pioneering this, guys. We're actually 10 years behind. You heard Remco talk, well, those who were in the Remco session yesterday, the banking financial sector has been doing this. We're investing for 10 years, been planning it for 20. But our time's now, in terms of insurance. So the concept is, I say concept because you haven't seen it, so I've got to say concept. We've built it, it's in. So you're looking at live assessment triage, see what the customer sees. So you've got a policyholder who doesn't want to repeat themselves over and over and over again because it's 3:30 in the morning and they've just had this significant event happen to their property. They just want to tell you what's happened and hopefully someone's going to act straight away. I say that in plain English, but that's exactly what they want. So if we had the ability to connect validate a policyholder and identify the customer immediately, and then on the flip side of it, we've got a mechanism that just connects a policyholder immediately to someone who's technical and can create a visual view of what's happening at their property. So let's just use a very simple claim. That's, if you don't know what that on the left-hand side, that's a burglar. Burglar's jumped the fence, he's kicked the door in and he's stolen the TV. Let's just use a very, very simple claim because I want to question the relevance of why we would wait 2 weeks for an assessor to turn up. A policyholder is immediately identified and lodges a claim with the broker. The claims administrator, they get set up on a SMS. So they get an SMS sent out to their phone and we can connect them directly. What that looks like is, it looks like this. We enter in their phone number, we send out the SMS, it goes out to their insurance hotline. The insurance hotline gives them, whilst they're still on the phone to me, so I'm able to walk them through this process. We're able to connect them straight away and directly. It goes through to their phone. I can see what they can see immediately. So what was stolen in the house, Mrs. Smith? Well, where did the damage occur, Mrs. Smith? Where was the TV position, Mrs. Smith? Have you got some form of validation? You've got the TV. Yeah, I've actually still got it in the box. It's a Samsung Curve TV. I only put it up last week. And the ability to be able to have a general conversation, a technical conversation to capture all the information. Is your door safe and secure? No, it's not. 3:30 in the morning, let me send out my carpenter to make sure we can secure that damage. Can you take some photos, Mrs. Smith? And the ability to be able to see all this instantaneously and act on it instantaneously, right, is light years away from where we are right now, which is waiting 2 weeks sometimes for action to happen. It's certainly 21 days. And the other applicability is if we've got a car involved. So let's just have a look at a large tree on a car, which again in Darwin is relevant. So from a motor side and a property side, you can capture the same. So you've got, I'm not suggesting we're going to bring these processes together. Certainly not saying you need to bring these processes together, but I'm just showing the applicability of being able to capture the car damage, and I'm using a different car here because the one under that tree you wouldn't have been able to capture. But as an example here, you're able to get live video streaming straight through and just check out the damage of the car. I'm sure there's other people out there. I spoke to a gentleman in risk last night who would like to be able to go out and assess or see properties in terms of before he writes the risk. SMS straight to the policyholder who wants to write the business with you. Measure the risk, drive time, travel time. And in Darwin particularly, or in Northern Territory particularly, when my assessors have got to drive 800 kilometres to get to a job. My old man works in Western Queensland in Toowoomba, and he's got to drive 8 hours west to Kalamata, which is west. It's almost in your Northern Territory, it's almost over the border. He's got to drive 8 hours west. He doesn't drive 8 hours west anymore. He rings the customer and he just sends them an SMS and says, let me see what you can see. Now, so there's implications there from a service perspective, but there's also implications of cost, particularly when we're charging $1.40 a kilometre. And you've got to drive 800 kilometres. Someone's paying for that. So there's better ways and new ways if a few folks get together and think about and collaborate on uses of technology like this. So what you just saw then was a 21-day process condensed into first notification of loss, one call. So I had a live lodgement, first notification of loss, I validated contents, I visually ID'd the causation and the damage. I might have arranged emergency services, the carpenter to come out and make sure the door was nice and secure at 3:30 in the morning, as opposed to having to wait at 7. And I was able to take action and potentially take photos and complete an assessment report. And on that type of claim, I might not have even had to go to site because I actually was on site. Now there'll be some in the room that'll say why that process can't work. Yeah, there might be people who say that. But versus what we're currently doing now in terms in the property space, we're a long way off being in the ER room where we're making life and death decisions and saving patients' lives. We've got the ability here to be able to connect folks who, I've got to say, at 3:30 in the morning, if a tree landed on my roof, I'd want to share that information to the quickest person as possible to make sure my property was damaged. My property was safe and secure as quickly as possible. So customers are saying, I want it faster, easier, better. I want my problems to be fixed. If that service was available, I would pay more. If I had that service, my deflection rate could generate 25 to 125% profit. So I'm just drawing all those things together in terms of a conclusion, because what it takes is over the next so for that 72 hours, and the people who need to get involved in processes like that, and just remember, this is only just one component. This is the first 72 hours of a claim. And for those who manage different claims, the applicability of this technology or others is just as relevant. So what we've been able to do in that first 72 hours, and generally what we'll be able to do across all claim lines in the future, if insurers and brokers and providers collaborate on better ways of doing business, will be revolutionary, and it's happening now. So the question you just need to ask is whether you want to be a participator or a spectator, because unfortunately the spectators' businesses won't be as healthy or as profitable into the future as they need to be, and customers will make a choice. My wife will never stand in HEF line again. She'll always swipe her card, and she'll always expect that card to be swiped back, because she'll never want to drag the 3 kids into HEF at a Westfield shopping centre ever again. So those companies have changed the way we've done business with them forever.